Okay, I know it's still 2:24 and 30 seconds, but I'm going to call it and get started. So hi, everybody. I'm Tasha Drew. I'm a co-chair for the SIG Usability. This is an intro session. I do see a bunch of really friendly faces who I know are very involved in SIG Usability already. Is anyone here new to the SIG structure or hasn't been to a SIG Usability meeting before? Awesome. Yay. So this is really intended to be an overview of what we're doing with SIG Usability and how to get started. So I'll go over some basics and then also go over some of the basics of some projects that we're working on right now in case there's anything people are interested in starting to contribute to. And we do have some of the leads of some of those projects here, which is awesome. And so if we have some extra time at the end, if you have any questions or want to dive into anything, we can absolutely do that. So why did we start SIG Usability is kind of, so Ross, the great Ross Kukulinski, I'm sure everyone here has read him before, but he said, Kubernetes is infrastructure software made by infrastructure engineers for infrastructure engineers. And I think that we can all really empathize with this statement. But looking at Kubernetes and how it is today, it's sometimes really hard for people to get started. And so thinking about how we can make that better and how we can make sure that we understand that the people using Kubernetes may not be sort of those infrastructure engineers who really specialize in Kubernetes anymore, but people who are trying to get other jobs done using Kubernetes as a platform is something that we really want to look into. So last year at KubeCon EU, Javier Salmeran from Bitnami did a really interesting overview where he went through Stack Overflow and looked at all of the questions being asked about Kubernetes and then bucketed them into different buckets. And then he and Bitnami could start to figure out what people were really struggling with and start to provide tools, services, and documentation to improve that. But as part of his deep dive into the Stack Overflow data, he came up with sort of what he thought Kubernetes as a project needed to do, and I highlighted in purple kind of his call to action, which was, should we start a special interest group in user experience? And this is an idea that's been floating around the project for a couple of years now. We had Matt Farina, who runs SIG Apps, say, it just hit me that Kubernetes has no SIG UX, and that says a lot about how we got to where we are as far as UX goes. And then this article is actually just from a few days ago in bold font. UX is Kubernetes' biggest short-term challenge. And there were a couple choice quotes in here from various people complaining about Kubernetes on Twitter. And they, NewStack also did a highly scientific poll with 100 respondents that shows that admin, operator, and developer experience is one of the top areas the Kubernetes project needs to address in 2020. So with all of this kind of ramping up as we look at the Kubernetes project, I guess we kind of got here in an interesting way. So we have started a new SIG, and that is the SIG that I'm here to talk to you about today. It's SIG Usability, and kind of there was a lot of people seeing that this was probably something that we needed to start really focusing on as an open source project. But the way this kicked off was I had a really simple request. I wanted to ask if we at VMware could possibly partner with the community to start having uniform iconography. And it turned out that no one knew even where I should go to answer that question. And so a couple different SIGs got involved and started saying, oh, like we should start a sub-project, let's do this, let's do that. And then we hit the dev mailing list to propose our sub-project. And one of the creators of Kubernetes, Brendan Burns, came back and was like, actually, I've wanted us to have a SIG that focuses on user experience for a really long time. He's especially passionate about accessibility in the project, and he wants to make sure that we're focusing on making it accessible for everybody. And so after a lot of conversation, we kicked it off, it got ratified, and now we have SIG Usability. So that's awesome, but we're a brand new SIG, and what that really means is that we have to chart our own path about what we're going to do. there's a ton of opportunity. I think it's also a really cool opportunity for people who may not be traditional contributors to Kubernetes to get involved. It's a place where we can both have developers and infrastructure engineers, but also start to open it up to designers, user researchers, and everybody who can look at the project and say, okay, how can I get started as a contributor? I think that this is really a space that we can open it up to more and more people. So that being said, we have now SIG Usability. For people who aren't acquainted with contributing to Kubernetes, we have 4 chairs. So there's me, there's Valerie, there's Raji, and there's Himanshu, who's here today. And also, Himanshu brought our SIG Usability button. So if anyone wants a SIG Usability button to sort of show your pride in usability in the Kubernetes, yeah, please grab one from him. But the way to get started with SIG Usability is we have a homepage, we have a repo in Kubernetes SIG for us to start collaborating as we build stuff out. But the best way to really start getting started is to join the Google group, and this applies to every SIG and working group. If you join the Google group, you can just go to groups.google and type in Kubernetes SIG Usability. That gives you access to all of our calendar appointments and all of our conversations as a group. And then it becomes very easy to kind of figure out what we're doing, get the links to the meeting notes, and then also get the links to our GitHub repos. So I would suggest that. We have every 3 weeks meeting that everyone's super welcome at, and we do videotape those meetings for people who want to check them out later. So join the mailing list, hop on a meeting, and we would love to chat with you. I'm gonna now spend some time just kind of going over some of the projects that we've been kicking off, and everyone is super welcome to say, hey, this is something I'm interested in, I'd really like to participate, and also look at our docs. So first, what we're looking at is understanding the users of Kubernetes. So right now, a lot of the different vendors in the Kubernetes space are spending a lot of time doing user research, doing design for their core customers, and understanding how their core customers want to use Kubernetes. We want to have that be part of an upstream process where we define some user research initiatives that the community should take on and fund, and then do that to better understand the users of Kubernetes. So from my perspective, I think optimizing the new user experience is really important, and we can't optimize the new user experience unless we are tracking it and unless we are really understanding who's coming to us and what jobs are they trying to get done when they come to us, and how can we make sure that they can get the answers quickly to the questions that they have so they can take the next step. And so how are we just optimizing that entire technology adoption cycle? So we also want to understand, and I know people usually talk about this in a SaaS terminology, but are we churning users, right? Are people okay, I heard about this Kubernetes thing, it's really cool, and then they come to our site and they just get frustrated and run away, right? And if that's true, why, and how can we make it better? So we need to really have a more holistic understanding of rough edges users are running into, and then we also need to start understanding who's using Kubernetes. As Kubernetes becomes more and more ubiquitous, there's more and more people trying to accomplish different things. So there's application developers who are trying to automate their application behavior using the Kubernetes control plane, who may not care about other aspects of the system, and who may be very different from the traditional infrastructure operators who are coming to Kubernetes at the beginning. Additionally, the infrastructure operators who are coming to us may not be, as we gain more and more users, may not be from super hip cloud native deployment shops. They might be more traditional virtualized infrastructure users who understand architecture a little differently and may need us to simply provide different organization to our docs. So these are all things that we're looking at and things that we're actively sort of investigating. And I'll go into a couple of the different projects that we've been scoping out so you can check out the docs and kind of add your feedback and ideas to them. So one thing that we have been talking about that we haven't really moved forward on, but that we feel very passionately would be excellent for the Kubernetes project, is doing an inclusive design initiative. Microsoft has a really great inclusive design page where they explain how they approach as an organization designing all of their products so that so that their products are accessible for people, usable for people who may be coming from many different backgrounds, have different speeds of Wi-Fi, like all kinds of stuff. So like how can we make sure when we ship a product that this design is inclusive of many different needs? So in some ways you need to recognize how products have been historically exclusive. You also need to solve for many people, and then you need to learn from diversity. And so Microsoft has put together this page where you can go and see all of the tenets of their design process, and we would like to do that in an open source way for Kubernetes, so that anyone who is designing something for the Kubernetes community can come to this site and understand the guidelines that we're providing to them so that they're doing it in an inclusive way. Another thing that we've been working on is a Kubernetes user survey proposal, and Gabby Moreno-Cesar has been working on this, and she's sitting in the back, and we are happy to talk about this in more detail later. But the link is online, so if you go to our Google Docs page, and all of these links are available in the meeting notes that you'll get sent the link to if you join the Google group. So it's turtles on top of turtles, but you can find stuff. And we also have a links page on our GitHub. But basically what we're looking at with this is let's gather quantitative data on our end user community. Let's recruit end users for future qualitative studies and start having people that we can start reaching out to as we're starting to better understand different pockets of our community. And let's also build awareness of SIG usability. We know that there was a ton of interest when we launched this project just because of the reactions we got from the mailing list. And so we want to make sure that that people are aware of the work we're doing, the progress we're making, and kind of build a ramp towards more and more successful interactions with the rest of the Kubernetes project. What we'd like to do as part of this user survey that is really in a really nice draft form right now is identify top tasks that end users do with Kubernetes, inform top barriers to adoption and successful production use, also inform our persona development. So right now, we know that the people who maintain Kubernetes are super users and maintainers of Kubernetes, but do we understand the users of Kubernetes who are not the maintainers, and how are they different, and what are they trying to do? And can we develop some personas that we all then think about as we're developing different tools and services? We'd also like to start engaging end users who are not necessarily involved in the community and making sure that they know that we have the strong community effort and that we'd like to hear from them and that we really value their user experience as they use our tools and services. And then we'd like to present those results, obviously, in a very open forum, probably at a KubeCon, but also as part of our regular meetings. Another proposal that we've been working on is a jobs to be done proposal. So jobs to be done is a methodology for how you, so that's a little bit different than the traditional persona-driven development. So the idea is instead of making up these carefully crafted personas with names that we then sort of say, well, what would Bob do in this situation? And we all kind of feel like we have a relationship with them. Let's think about what jobs are our users trying to do and really focus on it from that perspective. So what we want to understand is how Kubernetes fits into what users hope to achieve and really understand their end goal. And so by breaking their desired outcome into measurable steps, we can then provide statistically significant results on the areas that have the most opportunity to be improved within the Kubernetes project. So the big questions that we want to kick off with are, who are the main users of Kubernetes? What are they trying to achieve? How does Kubernetes fit into it? How will they go about doing so? And then what are our top opportunities for improving the project? And then this proposal is also totally open for comment if anyone would like to check. And all these slides are also up on the event page in PDF, so you can just click on the links. Cool. Himanshu has been working on a KEP for Cuddle events. And so Cuddle get events is a command that you can use within the Kubernetes CLI. It does have some limitations, so there's a backlog of feature requests of what people would like out of this event feature that we haven't been able to implement because of some architectural restrictions on how get events itself was written. So right now, any modification to watch functionality for events also changes watch for Cuddle get, which is a very widely used command since events is dependent of get. So being able to have extended behavior for the watch command becomes very difficult to implement. So he has a KEP out that basically lays out this usability problem with the events command, and then is getting a lot of feedback on how we can provide these updates to it. So this is an open KEP that he presented at one of our meetings that we're seeing a lot of good interest in. Finally, one of our other co-chairs, Valerie, who will be presenting on this in depth this evening, has been working on security by default, or sorry, tomorrow afternoon, has been working on security by default. This touches on work that a lot of other SIGs and working groups have also been thinking about, but when I spin up a Kubernetes cluster, right now when we look at conformance checks and everything, in order to sign off on a cluster as completely conformant with upstream Kubernetes, it has to be completely not locked down. So open, it's probably running the console, and so when you have a conformant Kubernetes cluster, you by default have a very unsecure cluster. So what Valerie is looking at is what should the defaults for a cluster be so that we're baking in security by defaults as people are coming newly to our project and spinning up new clusters. So as part of that, she's looking at what do you need to customize to have a good secure experience, with good in quotes. And then she also breaks down feature by feature that what she would use to secure a cluster, to say what obstacles are in place with those features themselves to successfully use them. So this is a very cross-cutting look at the various security features of Kubernetes, including pod security policies, RBAC, and a bunch of other stuff to say, here's how you could have a secure cluster, here's how we could improve these features to make them significantly easier to adopt and turn on, with the end goal at some point being that this becomes just simply your conformant cluster, like we could have a secure conformant cluster that everybody could then easily use. So she will be going into that in a great deal of depth at the SIG Usability Deep Dive, which is tomorrow, and I definitely encourage everyone to check that out. She also did a really nice presentation on Secure by Default at the Contributor Summit yesterday, which should have been recorded, I think. Cool. So basically, that's all of the work that the SIG Usability currently has in flight. Again, we would really, yes, Dr. Nick. So the icons, Pamela, what about the icons?
Well, you can check out the icons on the Clarity website.
But one of the reasons was she said we're going to get like a subgroup for icons.
Yeah.
So we open them up to the discussion with the team, and we want everybody to contribute to say that actually the icons they want to be open to everybody. But we do already have them on the Clarity website for people to start using them. But as a team, how we want to bring them out in the open source, we want to decide together rather than us just putting it out there for everybody to use.
Yeah. So I think that that's just one of the projects that we think would be really cool to have, like uniform iconography for like what is a pod, what is a cluster. Like when I'm looking at different user interfaces, how can I have like a really nice uniform understanding at a glance of what I'm looking at? And so Pamela has put together a really nice presentation showing all those icons. And then people keep pointing us to a different icon site, which is actually optimized for presentation. So like if I'm showing the Kubernetes logo, like how many pixels should I have? And like it's like what kind of square is it? And that's not the icons that we're talking about at all. So it kind of just shows how early we are in the whole process. But yeah, we have, so there is a clarity.design website that has open source icons for all of these already. And then we're just wondering if like we can move towards having more like uniform iconography in the upstream project as well. Great question. I can see you were listening. Cool. So these are our follow-up presentations. Gabby is going to be going over building an IBM Kubernetes service, and she also wrote a really cool Medium article all about SIG usability, how we got started, and a bunch of feedback that we've gotten from different people and some projects that we have going on. And then Valerie will be giving her presentation on her deep dive on sort of secure by default and how we could potentially achieve that tomorrow. So that's kind of everything that we've got going on. Super open to questions or anyone who wants to kind of talk about their perspective on usability within the Kubernetes project. But yeah. Cool. Well, thanks. Yeah.
Is there quite a bit of crossover with usability and ContribX? Obviously, maybe not obviously, but it sounds like ContribX is looking at the contributor perspective, usability is looking at user, but I would think some lessons learned from ContribX or you're borrowing. I don't know how much you interact with ContribX.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's actually several different SIGs that have Sorry, repeat the question. So the question was, what is the overlap with ContribX and SIG usability? And so the answer to that is that SIG usability has overlapping concerns with a bunch of the different SIGs. So for example, SIG docs, SIG UI, SIG ContribX. And what we want to do is make sure that we're adding something unique and then also working with everybody on what they're doing. SIG ContribX is awesome because what they're really focused on is making sure that as a contributor, I can get started. I have like a clear mentorship pathway to become a contributor, and that we are providing like this really nice equal footing for people who come from different backgrounds, and like that we are providing the tools and services that everyone needs to get started as a contributor. And then we're really focused on the end user experience of Kubernetes. So it's, as someone who wants to use Kubernetes, I come to kubernetes.io presumably, and then I try to figure out like what's going on here, what are you doing, right? And so obviously that does end up overlapping with the UI team in some ways, like they also own like the dashboard and some other pieces. But then we kind of come in and say, okay, like let's do some user research, like let's do some design work, and like let's push this by other people and get their feedback, and then kind of we can take all of that data and really use it to inform some of the more like some of the coding work that the other teams are doing. So it's a more end user focused piece of research. Yeah, cool. And actually one thing that we might be doing is we've had someone recently reach out and offer to redesign the Kubernetes website for us. And so they want us to tell them, like work with them on like what a redesign would look like from a usability perspective. So that may be some work that we help advise on in the future. Any other questions? Is anyone wondering about how to get started as a contributor or anything like that? Yeah? So the best way to get started as a contributor is to hop on the Google group, and then you'll start to get just updates about what we're talking about at our meetings, and links to our GitHub, and then also links to all of the docs which are in the meeting notes. So you can just kind of hop in and provide feedback and like offer up new ideas. And we're very open to new projects as well. So if there's something that you see that you would really like to kind of start driving as a way to improve the Kubernetes project, feel free to show up, give a presentation, kind of see if other people are interested and want to hop on. But that's kind of how all of the different SIGs and working groups work, is just, it's supposed to be very open. You can add yourself to the agenda, present on other work that you're doing, and then ask to collaborate. Cool. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you everybody very much. Yay.